G'day everyone, Artist Wayne here and welcome back to my Fury 3D tank build episode 2. In the last episode I started to bring this beast to life and today things are getting serious. The main gun is mounted and Fury is officially armed. Now it's time to tackle the tank's suspension and tracks. Hundreds of parts, hours of printing and the kind of job that separates the makers from the mildly insane. Let's get into it. As I push forward on this build, my mission is simple: to create the most realistic 1/10 scale replica of the Fury tank possible. The kind of model that makes you double take and wonder if it's the real deal. Woo-wee! I've started printing out that big gun. The same 76mm high velocity beast that turns Shermans into real threats on the battlefield. With the higher velocity and better penetration, it meant Shermans could compete with heavier enemy tanks. Today, I'm building this in plastic, but every bolt, barrel and detail is going to scream realism. This isn't just a model, it's history reloaded. So after getting Fury's main gun attached to the turret, it was time for the real battle, the suspension. And I must admit this part had my head absolutely exploding. With no plans, no diagrams, no part names that I could understand, it was instantly way more difficult than I ever anticipated. More goodies coming off the heat bed. But boy, this suspension is proving difficult. Just mystery parts, scattered files, and a whole lot of guesswork. So as episode 2 officially rolled into the war zone, I continued printing suspension parts and moved on to working on the tank's hull. A little bit of filler to tidy her up. And then I moved on to another big milestone moment in my Fury tank build. Whilst the suspension was still being sorted, it was time to give Fury her heart, the engine. In the last episode I gave the motor a full coat of green, but now it was time for the fun part, the oil, the grime, the dirt, the years of hard service. This isn't some clean museum piece. Fury's engine needs to look like it survived 100 miles of mud, rain, smoke and bad decisions. So I hit her with washers, stains, streaking oil and a whole lot of filth, and suddenly the motor went from a plastic print to a machine with a story. Then I jumped back into the suspension. My thinking was simple: if I could just manage to build one complete suspension unit, just one, I'd finally understand how everything fit together. And once I cracked that code, I could manufacture the rest like they were rolling off a production line. It took a lot of trial and error, a few headaches and a couple of "why do I do this to myself" moments, but I finally did it. One full suspension setup, printed, assembled and looking the part. And from that moment on, everything changed. My printer went straight into overdrive, pumping out suspension parts like it was working the night shift at a Sherman factory. Plastic flying everywhere, pieces lining up on the bench. Fury was starting to grow legs, literally. I mean, I've got to be honest here, it's not easy coming into a build like this. I know nothing about tanks, I mean absolutely nothing. So jumping into the suspension and track system of a Sherman, this was a trial by fire in every sense of the word. Every part I printed, I had to study like I was cramming for an exam. Every bracket, every wheel, every spring. I was figuring it out as I went. With no instructions and no part names, I was basically assembling history using guesswork and stubbornness. But that's the beauty of a build like this. The challenge teaches you as you go. With the entire lower suspension finally sorted, it was time to attack the upper half, and this is where things really started to get interesting. I had 3 small wheel setups and 2 intermediate units to build on each side, and for the first time in this whole process, I could actually see how everything was supposed to fit together. Piece by piece, wheel by wheel, the upper suspension started taking shape, and what's more, it was finally starting to make sense. After spending so long guessing, testing and scratching my head at mystery parts, suddenly the whole Sherman suspension system began revealing itself, and watching both sides slowly come together, that was the moment I realised I'm actually building a tank. Up until now I thought half these parts were just decorative. Turns out they actually do something. So with the grey wheels and suspension finally getting a matte black coat, things were really starting to look the part. And right on cue, my spool of black filament arrived, which could only mean one thing. It was time to start printing the tank tracks. And when I say tracks, I mean a lot of tracks. Link after link, hour after hour, my Prusa M4S was about to earn its keep. Each link took its sweet time, but slowly they began piling up on the bench, a growing mountain of tiny plastic armour ready to wrap around Fury's wheels. This was the moment where the tank truly started to take shape, when all the suspension work, all the wheels, all the late night problem solving finally paid off. The tracks were on the production line now, and Fury was rolling closer to life with every print. With the tracks well underway, it was time to start adding some colour and bring these parts to life. The wheels, the suspension arms, all those little components I'd been wrestling with, they were still sitting there in matte black, so before I fitted the tracks, I hit everything with a fresh coat of army green, getting all these parts ready for dirt and mud. Bit by bit, the suspension was starting to transform from a pile of plastic into something with weight, depth and purpose. Of course, model building is never a straight line, it's always about working on all fronts at the same time. Whilst the wheels and suspension were drying, I kept the printer running hot, churning out more parts for the tank. One of the big ones at this stage was the bracing for the Sherman's fenders. These braces add strength and shape to the whole side structure, and even though they're not the flashiest parts of the build, they're the kind of details that make the tank feel solid, like a real piece of armour instead of a hollow shell. This is where the build really starts to change. Once layers and layers of colour go on, the pieces stop looking like 3D prints and start looking like tank parts. I continued forging along with my juggling act. Whoever said model building was relaxing clearly never had 6 things happening at once. But it was undeniable that my progress was speeding up. Things are moving along quickly now, just starting to add layer upon layer of paint. As I kept adding more layers of colour, the whole suspension system really started to come alive. The wheels, the arms, the joints, every coat added more depth, more definition, more attitude. But don't you worry, this isn't the final look, not even close. All of this suspension is going to get absolutely caked in thick mud later on. The proper battlefield grime that Fury is famous for. Right now, I'm just laying down the foundation colours. The real transformation starts when we hit it with dirt, oil, dust, pigments, and all the filth this tank deserves. Trust me, things are about to get messy. But before I can bury this suspension in mud and battlefield grime, I need to take on one of the most fiddly parts of the entire build, the tracks. This is where patience becomes a survival skill. Each track link has to be printed, cleaned up, and then joined together one at a time, over and over, until finally I have enough to wrap around the suspension and wheels. It's slow, it's repetitive, and it's the kind of job that makes you question your life choices. But once they start clicking together, you can feel the tank taking shape. Link by link, inch by inch, Fury's tracks are coming to life. Well, one side of Fury's tracks are coming to life, but that first side taught me everything I needed to know. How many links I actually needed, how they all lock together, and most importantly, how that rear wheel setup works. Because on a Sherman, that rear idler wheel is what tightens the whole track system. Get that wrong and the tracks fall off. Get it right and this beast finally stands on its own. Once all of that finally clicked, I could open the printing floodgates. Track links and track guides pouring off the printer. Parts lining up across the bench, everything falling into place. At this point, my printer deserved a medal. Or a holiday. Because a tank isn't a tank until it stands on its tracks. And Fury was finally about to stand tall. And I have to say, finally, finishing the suspension and tracks was a moment of pure elation. This wasn't just another step, this was a massive undertaking. For weeks it felt like I was buried in wheels, springs, brackets, bolts, track links, mystery parts that looked like they belonged on an alien spacecraft. But once it all came together and the tracks wrapped cleanly around the suspension, everything changed. Suddenly, Fury didn't look like a collection of printed pieces anymore, it looked like a tank. A real tank. And just like that, I crossed one of the biggest milestones of this entire build. Both sides ready, both tracks built, and Fury officially rolling into the next stage. Alright everyone, that's a wrap for episode 2 of my Fury 3D tank build. The main gun is done, the suspension is finally assembled, and the tracks have been printed and fitted. And boy, let me tell you, that was a battle all on its own. But hey, this beast is really starting to take shape now as I add more weight, more attitude, more fury. Episode 3, I'll be stepping things up even more as I add hull details, armour plating, weathering, gear. This thing's going to look like it just rolled off the battlefield. If you're loving the build, make sure you hammer that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all in episode 3 of my Fury 3D tank build. I'm artist Wayne Dowsett, and thanks for watching everyone.